Okay, so I just finished making this beat, and now I'm gonna process a lot of the sounds and finish mastering it. To do that, what I've done is I've taken all the melodies, the 808s, and all the drums, put them all on one place, and then put on my pre-master chain, and then that's where I'm going to start my mastering process. And I kind of master in two stages on two different mixer channels. You could probably get away with doing it all in one, but ultimately, as long as it sounds good, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so for the pre-master chain, the very first thing I have is an EQ where I'm cutting the low lows as well as the high highs, and I'm kind of boosting the low sub-frequencies just a little bit. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so after this EQ, I have 3 instances of Maximus, and each one is doing essentially the same thing. It's all multi-band compression, and then I'm also messing with the stereo a little bit, as you'll see. And then after my Maximus presets, we've got a couple of patcher presets, a wave shaper, and a limiter. So let's begin. So the first instance of Maximus, I'm going to be focusing on kind of the extremes. So if we look at the bands, I've got 50 Hertz and below and 10K and above. But the process that I'll be doing within this Maximus will be basically the same on all of the instances. So, all right, let's begin. So on this first band that's 50 Hertz and below, I'm really making sure that my low end is getting up to, but not too much above, negative 8.7 decibels. And if it does, I want to start to compress it a little bit, like I'm doing. And if it wasn't getting up to here, I would push the volume a little bit, but I think I'm still going to push the volume because I want some of these kicks to also get up there. In fact, I'm going to go back to the mix, and I'm going to sidechain my kick to my 808 as well as to my melody. So let's go to the 808, sidechain the kick. And what this is doing is it's ducking down the volume of the 808 when the kick comes in so that they're not taking up so much volume together. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the melody, but not nearly as aggressively. I just barely want it to be ducking volume. I don't want it super noticeable. Let's go back to the pre-master chain. Okay, so I'm still going to push the volume a little bit more because I do want to see if I can get that low end of that kick just to be a little bit higher. And in fact, I'm going to go back to my mix. I'm going to turn the 808 down a little bit, and then I'm going to go to my kick, and I'm going to raise up the low end of this by just a little bit. So it's like 50 Hertz and below, so I'm just going to kind of do this. Something else I'm going to do with my low end is I'm going to do something that's going to resemble an S-curve. So I've put a node about as low as it can go, and then I'm going to take everything that's below this red line and make it a little bit quieter. So just kind of duck this down a bit. So that means anything off to the right, you can see a little red line going straight across the screen. Anything below that will now be a little bit quieter. And then I'm going to do the opposite with anything above it. So I'm going to make anything above it just a little bit louder. And part of the reason I'm ducking the volume that's quieter is because there's a little bit of like residual stuff going on here, probably from the melody, that I don't really want. So I'm kind of ducking the volume of that down, and then I'm doing the opposite with the louder stuff and just bringing that stuff up a little bit. And I'm also not going to level match on this very first low band, and that's because I'm getting my low end where I want it to be. So let's go ahead to the mids. I push this up by 0.7. Let's pull it back by 0.7. Let's go to the highs. I don't think I need to push or pull the volume at all here. Let's go to the master. I push this up by 0.7, but I'm not going to level match because this is the master and I'm not changing like the balance of the song. Okay, let's go to the next instance of Maximus, and we're going to do essentially the same thing. The difference will be the band placement. So my lows, instead of being 50 Hertz and below, it's now 175 and below. And then instead of 10K and above, it's 5K and above. So let's start with the lows. Okay, I push this up by 1, so I'm going to pull this back by 1. Let's go to the mids. Push this up by 0.7. Let's pull it back by 0.7. Let's go to the highs. I'm okay with compressing the highs a little bit more aggressively because in this case it means I'm compressing down the high end of my main rim. And I kind of want my hi-hats to be dominating the high end a little bit more so than anything else. And in fact, I'm going to expand the louder part of the hi-hats just a little bit. Let's go to the master. Push it up by 0.4. Let's go to our third instance of Maximus. Now the difference in this case will be how I set up the bands. So I'm going to solo the mid band, and then I'm going to move these until I don't really hear the kick or the 808 quite as much anymore, and then I'm going to move this one until I don't really hear the hi-hats anymore. Then the process will basically be the same. Push this up by 0.8, let's pull it back by 0.8. Let's go to the mids. Pull this back by 0.4, let's push this up by 0.4. And then I'm going to use the expansion tool again to make my main rim just a little bit louder. Now I'm going to go to my highs, and I'm going to kind of compress aggressively like I did before. And then I'm also going to now introduce a little bit of saturation to just the louder stuff. So what I like to do is flip between these two different saturation types, just kind of back and forth, around where I'm going to want the ceiling, which will be right there, around there. And whichever one I like the texture of better, I'll pick that one, and then I'll just kind of dial it back so it's not so aggressive. Okay, I think I like B better, so I'm going to dial this back. And then I don't need to push or pull the volume. Let's go to the master. I'm already pushing it at 0.7, and it looks like that's actually probably enough. Alright, so at this point in my mastering, what I'm going to do is I've got two nodes, one kind of as low as it will go, and then one about as high as it will go without being the highest. And I'm going to expand both of these regions just ever so slightly until it's 0.9 something. Okay, 0.93 is fine. And what that's going to do is make it so that anything above this green line will get just a little bit louder, and then anything below this green line will also get just a little bit louder. So it's just kind of making the loud stuff louder as well as the quiet stuff a little bit louder, but leaving the middle stuff alone. The next things in our chain are two patcher presets. The first one is for stereo separation, so the lows are being put in mono, the highs are being separated, and then you can kind of play with the middle bands. And then on the other patcher preset, I've got a mid-side EQ, where on just the sides, I'm cutting the sub-bass frequencies, and then I'm also kind of boosting the bass a little bit. I might actually boost this range a little bit as well. And then on just the mids, I've got a little bit of saturation, as well as a little bit of limiting that's happening. I've also got an EQ, which is cutting the low lows as well as the high highs. The next thing in my chain is a wave shaper, which is hard clipping, and I'm pushing 5 additional percentage of volume into this. So it's getting hard clipped off, and then after that I've got a limiter where I'm pushing 0.3 decibels of volume. And I'm not limiting at all, even though I'm pushing 0.3 decibels because of the hard clipper is clipping off a little bit of that signal on the top. And that is it for the pre-master chain. So let me save it. So let's do a little before and after. So here's before. You can see we're going above 0. Here's after. Okay, now we're going to go over to our master chain, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more volume. All right, so we've got a bunch of the same sorts of processes that are happening, or processes that are happening as in the pre-master chain. And so the first thing is an EQ, where I'm cutting the low lows. Then I have a compressor, which is currently mixed about halfway on. I'm going to start it with it halfway mixed on, and then later on, if my track isn't loud enough, I will mix it all the way on. And these are the settings. The threshold's that, the ratio is that, the gain's that. You can take a picture of that and look at it later if you want to. The next thing in the chain is a fruity limiter, which is basically just to monitor like what the signal looks like after the compressor, but really you don't really need this. It's just to look at things. Okay, the next thing in the chain is a patcher preset, which is doing the same thing as before, putting the lows in mono, putting the highs in the separated field. And then we have another instance of Maximus. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did before with Maximus. In fact, we're going to do the same thing we did before in the third instance, where we will solo the midband and move the bands in the same sort of way. Okay, and then the process will basically be the same. Okay, I push this up by 0.4, let's pull it back by 0.4. For the mids, and push this up by 0.8, let's pull it back by 0.8. Okay, and then I'm going to use the expansion tool again to do the same sort of thing and make that main rim just a little bit louder. Go to the highs. Okay, push this up by 1.1, let's pull it back by 1.1. And then I'm going to use some saturation in the same sort of way as I did before. Okay, this time I think I like A better, so I'm going to back this off. Go to the master. Okay, and then I'm going to do something that's kind of similar to what I did on the master in the third instance of Maximus before, except this time I'm only going to put one about as high as it will go, but not all the way up. And then I'm going to do the same sort of expansion thing, but to everything that's below it. So I'm going to bring this up to about 0.9 something. Okay, then I have a soft clipper, a limiter, and a loudness meter. So I'm turning off the soft clipper, and then I'm going to look at the limiter and just kind of look and see about how much I think I can push into the soft clipper before the sound just gets destroyed. And then we'll go from there. Okay, I might be able to get to like 1.2, 1.3. So I'm going to turn on the soft clipper, then I'm going to push 1.3 decibels. So it's going to be pushed 1.3 decibels. It's going to go into the soft clipper. Then we're going to see it here. Now what I'm going to do is use this loudness meter to tell me about how loud my track is. And if I'm not loud enough, I'll push volume. And if I'm too loud, I'll pull volume back. If you notice that I'm using this tool incorrectly, or maybe I can use it better in some way, please let me know down in the comments. I'm mostly looking for a couple of things. Just this integrated LUFS, this short-term LUFS, and then the true peak max. This number will tell me about how loud my track is overall. The short term will tell me, obviously, in the short term how loud the track is. And then I'm making sure that my track doesn't go up to or above 0. Okay, I can already tell that we're not going to get loud enough. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this compressor all the way on. And then turn up the gain just a little bit on it, just 0.2. And then I'm going to run it again. Okay, I want to push a little bit more volume. So I'm going to come back to the limiter that's at the very end of the mastering chain, basically. And I'm going to push into the limiter just a little bit. So 0.2 is probably fine. Then I'm going to push a little bit into the soft clipper a little bit more. So that's 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to run it again. Okay, so as you can see, I actually got up to 0, but I am about as loud as I think I want the track to be. So I'm going to go back to my limiter. I'm going to pull it down by 0.1, and that's going to be about it for the video. And then, so since this is just telling me how loud things are, I don't actually need it when I export, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And yeah, for the purposes of this video, that's going to be about it. So if you have any questions about any part of the process, feel free to let me know down in the comments. Also, if you see how I can improve this process in some sort of way, feel free to let me know in the comments as well. But yeah, let's let it ride. Hennessey.